Much, much better though. Is it not?
It is. Yes.
It is.
All right, everybody. Well, it is 6:32. I'm going to call the meeting to order of the Nashoba Regional School Committee. We are going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance, so everybody can rise if they so choose and recite with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. We're moving on to citizens' comments, and I am unaware of any. Okay, so we'll keep going with the consent agenda, and I'm going to ask our Vice Chair to read the motion.
I move to approve the consent agenda of February 7th, 2024, containing draft meeting minutes of January 17th, 2024, and January 24th, 2024.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Sharon. Any discussion on these minutes?
I have one. I just noticed that there was one typo in the minutes for January 17th. January 17th, the salary listed is off.
I already brought that to my attention.
Perfect. Okay.
Great. So we're just adding a 0, I believe.
Yes.
Is that right? Okay. Very good.
Well, replacing a period with a comma.
Okay.
What's Hope paying him more than $25?
Seems rather slave-like.
The record will reflect $225,000. Okay.
So Amy, you want to do that as amended?
Sure. So I reread it and just say it as amended. Okay, I'd like to amend my motion to approve the consent agenda of February 7th, 2024, containing the draft meeting minutes of January 17th, 2024 as amended, and January 24th, 2024.
Sharon, you second that? You're okay with that change? Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor? All right. School committee chairperson update is next, and there's nothing for me to share outside of what's already on the agenda, so we will move to our student representative report. Over to Hansi and Ava.
Hi everyone. So our report today is looking for a way to reincorporate the student voice with the school committee and kind of seeing what the students want and how we can work with the school committee to fulfill this, whether this be through amendments to the student handbook or otherwise. So Superintendent Downing, Chairperson Viverito, and Vice Chairperson Cohen visited our student council meeting on January 24th, and it resulted in a very productive session with our student council. And we kind of discussed and addressed concerns that students have and any improvements that they would like to be seen, particularly for the new building. And we kind of have a 5 big topic summary from that meeting to discuss with you today.
So our first big umbrella was teacher grading, student-teacher dynamics, and test schedules. Several students said that several teachers are not being empathetic towards students and aren't realizing that there has to be a balance of schoolwork being assigned because students attend more than 1 class per day and most students partake in different activities after school and outside of school. A lot of students complain that they are not getting grades for major assignments or assessments back in a timely manner, which hinders students' abilities to learn from their mistakes and know where to improve of how long it has been since the material was taught. When students report incidents with teachers, there is little to no change that happens. Distribution of tests is not equal throughout the week. One student mentioned having at least 3 tests every Friday. There was an idea to assign specific days of the week to certain tests in certain classes. And another umbrella concerns school spirit and community bonding. Each grade is very cliquey from both aspects. A lot of people have their own groups. There's not a lot of intermixing of students. And there's not a lot of socializing outside of kids' friend groups. The school spirit has gone down tremendously. The pep rally was disappointing because a lot of people left, so there weren't many people, it wasn't as fun. Spirits at sports games are very inconsistent, so students want more spirits at events. The third umbrella revolves around the schedule for the new building. Kids would like to have slightly longer passing periods in order to use the bathroom, run to their lockers, grab a snack, etc. A lot of students complain that they didn't receive the electives they want and ends up being placed in ones that they don't like. Kids feel a lot of their schedule ends up unbalanced. Upperclassmen in particular would like to have more AP class offerings starting freshman year. Many students feel like the work of an AP class in an honors level course but aren't receiving the credit for it.
The fourth umbrella revolves around open spaces and overall campus life. So students mentioned that they understand why some bathrooms are closed in the building because of vaping and vandalism, but this just moves around to different bathrooms within the building. It's not really an issue that's being fully resolved. So a lot of students will like to see all bathrooms being open for convenience because it's not really an issue that's fading. It just keeps migrating around the building. Students would also like to see key cards to enter the building because of how long it takes to get from the student parking lot to the main doors, especially if we have study first period. We'd also like to consider the opportunity to have an open campus or at least something similar to it. And I think this will be especially beneficial if the schedules for the new building consisted of longer lunch periods where kids could have that opportunity to go out, grab lunch, or even go home since none of us live too far away. And when if they come back to school, that'll be on them. If they decide not to, they'll have to face that penalty afterwards. So if we can figure out some sort of balance where kids can go out and do their thing and come back for the latter half of the day. Students would also like more comfortable and flexible study spaces. When teachers are out, the current study room gets really crowded and it becomes hard to focus and get any work done. And the same applies for the auditorium because there's no tables to put our things on. Students want to revisit the possibility of having study periods in the cafeteria, so it makes it easier to grab a snack and just to spread out overall. On a related note, seniors want to clarify what our senior privilege contains. We've heard several complaints from seniors who say that when they have a free period, they're not given priority to go to the library. Instead, only kids who have a scheduled study are allowed to sign a sheet to go there, and remaining spots go to our seniors. The fifth and final umbrella tonight involves opportunities for the new Pathways program. So at the onset of high school, students are starting to figure out their passions and we're starting to consider the array of careers that we can possibly pursue. And many students have jobs that, like after school hours, but they work at these places just to make money. It's not really something they can see themselves doing in the future. So we all are at an age where we're just trying to figure out what we want to do, whether that be enter the workforce directly after high school or go to college, figure out what our major is going to be and what our future career is. So we want to see the introduction of internship opportunities, either paid or unpaid, and we were thinking that this can be linked to the Pathways program. So this will be really beneficial for kids to find their passions and future career paths, but it's also kind of important to learn valuable life skills and communication. So that's what we had tonight.
Thanks, guys, very much. I will just start by saying that I've been sitting here for 5 years and I've never heard such a fascinating share out, and we're really appreciative of your effort here and all your hard work to pull this together. I'd also like to thank Dr. Bolton for inviting the school committee and the superintendent into your meeting, which we hope can continue on somewhat of a regular basis going forward. It's just really brave for the school to open its doors like that to the community and allow some of this conversation to happen. And the last thing I'll say is I got a little bit of feedback coming back around in talking to a couple of students, just wondering if anything will come of it. And so, where do we go from here with the concerns that students voice? And I feel confident that your staff and especially your leadership team is going to be faithful to the promise they've made to continue school improvement and school culture improvement. And whatever we can do to help that, whatever is within our purview, we will certainly set ourselves to that task. So we look to you guys for direction and letting us know what you need. And I'd open it to the superintendent and then members of the committee as well.
Yeah, it was a great meeting, and I think, this is one of those, we're stepping into this arena in order to engage with our student bodies more. So the sponsor of our student council is Melissa Foley-Croco, who is leading that effort. So we're working together on what our, if you will, sort of regular routine will be of engagement, and that'll be defined later this spring. So I want to thank our students for bringing that in. They were very enriching conversations, and you thank Dr. Boyden. That was the other thing I wanted to do as well. Thank you.
And I'll turn to Amy first, and then maybe we can go around. If there's something that you wanted to add, Amy, you were there.
I was there. I think you said it probably better than I could. The only other thing I wanted to add was that I think we should all acknowledge that it took a lot of courage for students to be able to give that kind of report in this setting. And so I applaud you for being the messengers and taking on that role. And I really look forward to this just being the beginning of a dialogue that happens as we kind of work with the administration and Dr. Boynton and the student council to kind of figure out the path forward from here.
Any other members have any questions or comments? Yeah.
I thought that was awesome. To provide that kind of feedback with that level of detail in such an orderly way felt like you guys were entering kind of a new level of partnership with the district, and that's really how it should be. I was going to ask kind of something similar to Ms. Viborito, which was maybe rhetorically, think about the pathways that will allow these things to actually get resolved and addressed. And one of the things that you might want to consider is collectively getting together and considering solutions, right? So you guys have identified the challenges. Maybe the next step is to speak with leadership, building leadership or district leadership, and offer up multiple solutions per challenge. And I think that way, whatever does get resolved is going to be kind of more aligned with the concerns that you have. So just a thought. Thank you. That was really great.
And that does it for the student report? That was it, guys? Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thanks again for being here and for doing the work. Okay, guys. All right, so we are going to move on to the superintendent's report, and we are going to, I hope you don't mind, as long as it's without objection, we're going to cut the superintendent's report in half, and the updates to strategic work is largely the formative evaluation update. We're going to bump that down a little bit lower. So what you will hear next are just the superintendent announcements. Okay, everyone?
Yeah.
Sound good? All right, so Kirk, I'll turn it over to you for that portion.
Great, thank you. Don't let any of my brevity be a sign of not having detail. Trying to manage the words to control this cough.
Sorry.
Quite right. As you know, before your request has come forward to look at some 24-25 school year calendar adjustments. And excuse me, I'm going to get there. And so we are considering those adjustments. I'm looking at those, and I have a recommendation for you tonight. When we vote our calendar days, the state doesn't necessarily have their voting dates set in the calendar yet, particularly as we take 2-year looks at a calendar at a time. And so knowing that for the second consecutive time, 2022 being the previous time, the primary date was set on the day after Labor Day. And so the wheels are in motion with activities around that as well. And so it would behoove us to have that be a no student day on that particular day, so that we can ensure voting. Stowe has a different challenge for voting than the town of Lancaster and the town of Bolton. The town of Lancaster doesn't utilize the schools for voting. The town of Bolton is able to utilize the high school and partition things in such a way where the access for voters into the voting areas is accessible. And so for the town of Stowe, we want to make that a no students, a no school day. However, shift our professional development day that is typically held in March. The upcoming year it would be March 21st, which actually can be quite advantageous for us with the onset of a new literacy curriculum coming in, the PLC work that we've been doing that we've talked about a lot in our strategic plan. That will give us an opportunity to utilize that day to do the launching PD for those efforts. So there's some timing to that is very beneficial. And also, that will give us the opportunity to use multiple buildings around the district to do that work in. So the recommendation would be to have no school on September 3rd, and then we would have school in session on March 21st, as noted in this calendar. The other concern that was brought up was around the presidential election, which will be a large election on November 5th. And to address that concern, that is currently on the calendar as a teacher conference day, parent conference day, student conference day, depending on how you frame that. And we believe we can continue to host our conferences. Two major factors. So one of the things the pandemic taught us is the virtual conference can be quite useful for many families. And it's frankly the preferred option when given the two options. And the way we structure that is we designate and assign, this is a virtual day, this is an in-person day. And so the virtual day will be scheduled as the election day. So we will not be bringing any parents in their vehicles onto the campus for the purpose of conferences. So then we have to deal with the challenge of congestion of faculty parking. And in talking with both the police and fire chief in the town of Stowe, we can use the rear field behind center to put all of the employee parking that particular day, put up the proper signage in the parking lots that this is voting parking, those types of things, and put the folks there. In the event there's a weather event or something of that nature, we can use Hartley Road and the Hale campus as well. Because for our teachers in the classroom setting, we have about 24 people if we have if there's 4 sections in every classroom. So other activities that potentially could be happening would center around folks that aren't front-facing to conferences, and we would host those professional development activities in other buildings. So I think we can move forward with our plan of having the conference day remain November 5th and be able to accommodate the voters of our towns sufficiently. So the recommendation is to have no school for students and have it be Professional Development Day on September 3rd, 2024, and March 21st of 2025 return to a full session normal day. So I'm going to pause there before I get into the other particular 2 items. And this is an item that would require a vote of the committee.
Yep, and that vote is scheduled for the next meeting. But are there any questions at this point in time on those couple of changes on next year's calendar? Right, so there'll be an opportunity to weigh in.
Can you just clarify, so that March 21st is currently scheduled as the PD day?
Correct.
So it's just a switch?
It's a switch. It moves it forward. If you look down the calendar and see the complexity that's new to our calendar building in the most recent years is that the federal holiday of Juneteenth is on June 19th. And so with the 5 extra snow days, that would extend another day beyond that. So even in this calendar, if we had 5 extra snow days, that would take us to June 23rd. And then 2 more days would take us threateningly close to the end of the month. So it's good to make sure we're playing that conservative. If we hearken back to, what was the year? Was it 2012? We had the series of storms, and we had, in many school systems, had 8, 9 snow days, depending on. That was our year of the atmospheric river, right? That hit the Northeast. So I think we can effectively do this and make sure that everything runs smoothly.
All right, so it seems like there are no additional questions on the calendar, so we'll keep going with the superintendent announcements.
Included in here is Ms. Mariah Zwicker, who was our nurse leader and working her way to be our district safety officer in due time, is in those trainings right now, has provided us an update on a program that she has signed up that is free to us, that helps us with our school. It's a school wellness coaching program, and so it's provided free of charge and gives us the ability to internally look at all of our wellness programs. And Mrs. Wicker requested that I add this update to the school committee agenda tonight to let you know that just in the opening days, if we were coming in, she sees this as an opportunity for us to look at wellness in the district. So we're very happy that Nurse Wicker is going to be leading us in those efforts. Next is the past 2 days, we have hosted 2 candidates for our Director of Student Services, and Miss Ryan Demanchi from Fitchburg and Dr. Maria Reardon from Natick both visited, met with our cabinet team, toured the district, had an individual interview with me, met with all of the office personnel in special education, and then finally we had a community forum. It was lightly attended. We had a handful of parents in the community forum, but it did give those candidates an opportunity to answer the questions that were generated forward from our CPAC. And so now that our candidates have been through, I will be doing all of my due diligence to make a selection. And this is a position that is in state statute, state of Massachusetts, the school committee votes to approve. So the superintendent recommends the hire, so I'll bring that forward to you at our February 28th meeting. And you vote approval of the superintendent's recommendation. So I'll take any questions on that. That concludes the report, with the exception of the strategic work.
Right. So great information there. Just really quickly, you are going to present us on February 28th with the candidate of your choosing.
Yes.
We will be voting that night. Like we would probably vote on the 6th, March
Yes.
6th.
For expeditious purposes, I'm going to look for a vote that evening.
You are.
Yeah. Yeah, we're in a time, it's a competitive hiring season.
Yeah.
And we don't want to delay.
Okay. So just be aware, everybody, that that is going to kind of go against our protocol. Any objections there?
I will say is my goal to have that announcement out next week.
Well in advance.
Well in advance.
Of the 28th.
So the announcement will not be the 28th. The announcement, I want to be able to do all my due diligence and have that out by the end of the week next week. So you will know the candidate and we will make sure that you're supplied with materials with plenty of advance notice.
Okay, go ahead.
Were the community forums recorded and available for those that could not attend?
They were not recorded, no.
Is there a summary of their responses to the CPAC's questions?
No, they don't. As part of the interview process, that was the standard element of the interview process. Community members did provide feedback forms, so they completed those feedback forms, so I have their direct feedback on what they thought of the candidates.
I wish that was a possibility. I was one of the people who would have loved to attend, but 3 o'clock were not feasible.
That's a challenge.
Yeah,
Okay.
so it would just
We'll
be
note
good
that.
to know. Do you know if the CPAC, or were there representatives from the CPAC?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'll answer questions on that piece. All right, so let's keep going.
I think that concludes the formative evaluations next, and we'll do that in new business.
Actually, I do have one.
Oh, go
question. Sorry. Are you able to tell us how many candidates applied for
Oh,
that
yes.
position? I'm so sorry.
I'm getting there.
I know, it's awful. I feel like we're torturing you.
We have 13 candidates.
Did you say 13?
13 candidates applied. Of those 13, 10 of them had all the credentials that met the requirement of the position. So all of those candidates were screened by our team in that process. 5 of those candidates were advanced to the interviews. The night before the interviews, one of the candidates pulled out because they accepted a job in another school system. So the panel interviews had 4 candidates. We had 2 finalists. It's interesting to note of that field, there were 3 sitting SPED directors that participated in that process.
Go ahead, Dana.
Did you previously work with Dr. Reardon and Natick?
Yes, I did.
So you've worked with her before?
Yep.
right, everybody. So, continuing on with the alteration of our agenda, and just to be as efficient with our time as possible, mostly, we are going to move toward the formative evaluation training. So, no, I'm just kidding. We're going to move on to the program of studies so that we can hear from Dr. Boynton, and perhaps she could go home. Afterwards.
Schedule, I'm glad I got here.
Yeah. So welcome Dr. Boynton to the table. She has submitted for us both the program of studies as she hopes it to be, and also a summary of the changes that were made.
So I want to thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share and present today. One note about the program of studies that you have, it does not include the first 3 pages, which is the cover page, has our mission, as well as the accreditation statement. Those largely are unchanged, and so that will go into the final version. So as the change memo, which is an executive summary, shares, is that over the last 2 years, we've made significant changes to the program of studies, and this year represents a pause and major changes as we take the time to reflect on and evaluate the changes that we've made over the last few years. This pause also reflects where particular departments are within the curriculum renewal cycle. So now we have this very robust 5-year curriculum renewal cycle. So most of the changes are to enhance readability as well as to better reflect the student experience. So some small tweaks. I can highlight a few of the larger, I guess, more significant adjustments. In the applied arts, we added a small indication of courses that will be innovation pathway eligible courses as we continue the process of securing that designation from the state and from the Department of Education. It's premature to fully announce that since we have just submitted the grant. However, we anticipate being welcomed into the Innovation Pathway Program, and we'll be presenting later on once we secure grant funding with more information. But we wanted to indicate which courses we currently have could be designated as Innovation Pathways courses. I would say the other major change is in our English programming and our Comp 101 class, which is a dual enrollment class. We're putting a pause on that class for next year because Quinn-Sigmund Community College has significantly adjusted their fee structure, and so we're taking a pause to explore additional community college partners. We view it as a really important component of our program of studies and of our student experience, but we're looking at exploring other higher ed partnerships for this dual enrollment opportunity. And I think that is the 2 major changes. Other than that, some course descriptions were adjusted. In our world language programming, we are no longer pursuing Portuguese as a language. We did have a staff member resign, and we do not have anyone who is qualified to teach Portuguese, so we're hitting pause on that as well, sadly. And then in social studies, we're looking at semesterizing the AP government class to maximize the election season in the fall. The course can be taught in a semester, and so to really maximize the presidential election and enrollment, it'll be a semester class. And then looking at some slight adjustments to the grade levels for some other social studies electives. Other than that, it was very small tweaks to language to add clarity and represent kind of what's really happening within the courses. And I will happily take any questions.
Great. Thanks, Kate. Any questions on the course? I guess I could ask, I noticed that you're going to be not offering classes at the CP level. Can you
They haven't been offered at the college prep level for a while, and so it reflects the current offerings. They've been lingering in the program of studies for several years. And so when, as we undergo our curriculum renewal cycle, one of the things that we are deeply looking at is our level structuring, and then ensuring that we're providing equity and access to all students, so taking an equity lens. And you might very well see over the next couple of years some restructuring of our levels that really opens up access for students to coursework.
Great. Okay, thank you. All right. Would you like to say anything on that?
I just want to thank Dr. Boyd and her team for doing a thorough job of looking at the courses sites and making sure it reflects how students are enrolling in the courses a day. And as you heard Dr. Boynton signal, that as we go through those curriculum renewal cycles, this is going to be a deep part of that, and the leveling structure of our courses can provide equity and access to all students.
And this does not require a vote of the committee.
Does
It's
not.
just for our information. Okay,
For your
everyone?
benefit. Yeah.
All right. So,
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Have a wonderful night.
All right, I am going to now project for us. We're going to move into our next item of business, in new business, and that is the formative evaluation training. This is a short presentation that the personnel subcommittee has kind of prepared for you guys so that you would have a better idea of what is required of the school committee at the formative evaluation phase of the superintendent evaluation process. So, away we go. And we're going to do our very best to just present from our seats, and you guys tell me when you want me to forward. Go for it.
Okay, so this is a training that was put together last year by the personnel subcommittee, and we tweaked a little bit for this year's training and for the group that's here this year. This training is part of, I think, the effort to be sure that is, in addition to this committee, that the information is easily accessible and understandable to the community as well. So, thank you. If you remember, in the fall, we superintendent presented goals, asked for feedback, and we voted upon goals for this year. And throughout the fall and up until ongoing, this is being implemented. We are now at the part down in the left corner there of the mid-cycle or formative assessment. And in order to, I think our goal is to give you a kind of a broad overview of the big picture and then bring it in to focus on the formative assessment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass it on to, do you have the next part, Leah?
Mm-hmm.
Pass it on to Leah. Just talk a little bit from like a 30,000 foot look at what the overall work of the committee is, and then bring it in to look more at the goals for this year, and then bring it back at the end to look at what we will be working on tonight.
It's really important that the committee and the community understand the purview of a school committee in Massachusetts, and these buckets kind of represent what we are responsible for. We believe that chief among these things is to evaluate the superintendent's performance as it relates to student achievement. There are other things that we're responsible for as well, but as you know, with regard to student achievement, we think hiring and evaluating the superintendent is the most important, and we want all of you to participate as much as you can in the process. The superintendent evaluation is our primary responsibility. It's the chief way that we can achieve our reason for being, and that is increasing or improving student achievement. And so what we, I think, appreciate about Kirk's leadership is that he has a holistic approach that is helping all of the different mechanisms of our system kind of plug together and in an effort of pushing student achievement. So this is kind of a busy graph, but here we go. It all starts with our strategic plan. The strategic plan is the root of all things. His goals, as you guys will recall tonight when he presents again, the goals grow out of the strategic plan, as do the school improvement plans and our own school committee goals. But what you can depend upon, and what we are not necessarily privy to, is that administrators and teachers also build their goals from these things as well. And whereas Kirk does not necessarily have direct impact on students, meaning he is not their teacher, he does have kind of control over making sure that the strategic plan, which we find so important, does make its way all the way down to the classroom level. And that's what we're hoping to show this evening. Over to Mike.
Okay. Well, some of you may be familiar with SMART goals, and of course, SMART is sort of an acronym for the lens through which we establish goals, through which educators and our superintendent, of course, will establish the goal. The goal should be specific and measurable. It should be attainable. Sometimes it's actionable. It should be relevant, and it's timely. And some of you were here with Dr. McCarthy, and she revised the SMART goal lens to the SMARTY lens to include inclusion and equity into that lens. So as far as the requirements from DESE, there are multiple required goals, including one professional practice goal and one student learning goal. There is a recommendation of 2 to 4 district improvement goals, of which I believe the superintendent has selected 4 district improvement goals, which we'll see on the next slide. And then in addition to those goals, there are standards that the superintendent has to be able to demonstrate a level of competency towards. And those standards include indicators in 4 different categories: instructional leadership, management and operations, family and community engagement, and professional culture. So again, the recommendation is to choose anywhere from 6 to 8 indicators or descriptors that fall within those standards. And again, the superintendent has chosen, on the high end, I believe, he has selected 8. And so I'm certainly not going to read the goals since we approved them, and they are part of the public record at this point. But again, there you can see the professional practice goal at the top left. Bottom left is the student learning goal, and then there are the 4 district improvement goals that you are familiar with at this point. And the next list. Sorry. Oh yeah. And the next list is a diagram of the 4 standards, including instructional leadership, and from that, the superintendent has chosen 3 indicators: instruction, assessment, and data-informed decision making. The second standard, which is management and operations, and from which the superintendent has chosen 3 indicators: environment, scheduling, management of information systems, and fiscal systems. The third standard, family and community engagement, from which he has chosen 1 indicator: sharing responsibility. And finally, the professional culture standard, from which he has selected shared vision as the indicator. So again, a total of 8. Sharon.
So if we go back to our cycle, and can you go to the next slide? Sure. So what does this mid-cycle evaluation look like? What's the work that we're doing now? Superintendent has a presentation that will give us updates on each of the goals and the progress that's been made for each of the goals that were set in September. And our work is to make sure that we have a clear understanding of the progress that's being made on each goal, and how that, the through line to each of the standards as well. And then if we have an opportunity to provide some feedback and to make course adjustments if necessary in order to make the progress towards the goals that we're looking for. And the feedback must be provided in this meeting. Yes.
I always like to illuminate that asterisk, because this is actually Kirk's 3rd year, and it will be the last time that you are in a 1-year cycle.
We've done this a lot.
So, there's a lot of goal setting and proving yourself in the first 3 years as an educator, superintendent included. The next time we do this, it will be a 2-year cycle. Okay, so the formative evaluation would happen in June. This is actually going to be placed into the materials. This whole presentation will be. And there are some resources here for you guys to link to if you see fit. But all of this is in your possession already. I wonder, let me see here.
Can we go back just one slide? I just want to clarify one thing. The third empty bullet down is really important, and that's the way that I always see the formative stage. This is our opportunity to provide feedback to the superintendent with regards to the evidence that he provides thus far. If our understanding of appropriate evidence towards the goal differs from the superintendent's evidence, this would be the opportunity to say, actually, I would love to see more of this, or it would be appropriate to share this kind of evidence. And if you remember last year, I think last year everything was sort of housed in this spreadsheet, and then based on our feedback, you went in a different route in the summative evaluation. Is that right?
Yeah, that was the conversation where I read something like, lots of good work here that's overly complicated. Simplify it.
So that's just a really good example of how our feedback can make its way into the summative evaluation at the end of the year. So tonight's a really important night, and it does say that the feedback has to be provided in a public meeting. This would be the ideal opportunity to do that.
So before we turn it over to Kirk for his presentation, do you guys have any questions about the formative evaluation or evaluation generally? Okay. Toward the end of the year, we'll give you another little brief training on the summative evaluation, which is the end of cycle review. There is a report that each one of us is responsible for writing. And so understanding this all as we go will help you do that writing at the end of the year. And each individual report that each of us writes will be collated into one report by our lucky chair of the personnel subcommittee. And she will get help from the other members of personnel as well to make that collated presentation.
I just have a comment on that too, is that this format that you're going to see and that was in the materials, the an advantage of this format is that none of the information, when you get to the summative evaluation at the end, or even now, this information shouldn't be new. We've seen it because it's been part of updates as we've been going along, and we're getting another look at it now. So it feels like a really overwhelming task to do this evaluation, but I think if you can look at it as this is information that we've already seen, it helps to make that feel a little bit less daunting.
All right. So Kirk has prepared for us a presentation on his goals and how he is making progress toward the standards, and I'm going to let him take it away.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I took a RICOLA intervention. Let's see if that has any impact on this. So, thank you for all that, and thank you for your presentation, because you provided some context that is, frankly, now going to shorten my presentation a little bit. So I want to thank you all for the consideration, and I think Ms. Pock summarized it well. We write our superintendent reports citing the strategic initiatives and objectives to help you follow the ball along with the work that we're doing towards the goals throughout the year. And if you recall from February, the goals form was provided in the meeting materials from our September meeting. And that's the form for which you'll have the links to all the evidence in the summative meeting at the end of the year. This is to give you a formative sense of how we're doing. And I had somebody suggest to me that they had a way to sort of meter along the way the activities that were done to date in terms of progress towards goals. So I've taken that suggestion and I reviewed it with Ms. Pock this week. So I welcome your feedback in terms of how it's presented to you tonight. So again, district objectives, goals, and performance standards will be reflected here. And those are our 4 district goals as they're related in the strategic plan. So to help you along with this, there's coding involved. You guys know how I like my color coding, right?
We do.
The green indicates that it's ongoing or operational. I want to really emphasize to the committee, it does not mean complete. many of the activities and actions that are on our plans don't ever reach a completion date. There's no maturity date, if you say. It just means the things that we're putting into place become operational. So for instance, we're in our first year of PLCs. We've built them operationally, but we're in the infant stages of PLC development right now, as an example. In development means these are things that we're planning and working on, but we haven't yet launched them. But we're doing the work behind the scenes to get there. And the blue is yet to begin. We haven't taken any steps to address those particular parts of the action steps that were provided to you earlier this year. So let's take a look at communication, connections and communications. When we look at this, you've all seen the new website, and we're working on the publishing of the Finance and Operations Transparency page, along with the informational videos to complement the content of the transparency page. I know we have our scripts written for that. The videos are being developed. They should be coming very, very soon to help our community understand simply how the construction of the budget happens. Some big things we did here: the decoupling of the school psychologist and evaluation team chair roles to provide more efficiencies at the school level with communications and the functioning of our special education department. You learned this year the listening sessions that were hosted as part of the search for a new student services director were completed. And we say activate the communication specialist position. We don't have the position, rather we know that we were able to elevate our extended day coordinator to be our communication specialist. And so you've been seeing the press releases and media communications that she's been doing along the way. And Ms. Hannigan has done a tremendous job there. So some things, and this really should be read: strength and promotion, communications and conference offerings and opportunities, 8th grade for Nashoba Regional High School. That's my error. That should really can be all 3 colors, to tell you the truth, because there's some steps we've taken. It was noted that the significant difference in the incoming students night that was held at the high school in terms of the efforts that are being made to exemplify the programming there. Ms. Hannigan is about to launch with Dr. Boynton a newsletter that is intended to be directed towards our families of 8th graders and those students to highlight the programs and things that are offerings that are happening at Nashoba Regional High School. Ms. Friend, that's going to be happening very soon. Friday, I think, is the first edition of that.
Teacher focus.
So you'll see that. So that's an example of, we got a green, a yellow, and what's in blue is that we're going to be building some surveys around students' interest in activities, athletics, arts, extracurricular program. They'll be coming out in April. So the communication cycles with the universal screening data have been enacted in our grade levels as required through the Department of Education. Our family university work was is a big goal for us, and I'd say we just have not done any formal activities around developing that action step toward this goal to date. Shifting now into teaching, learning, and leading. I'm just going to come to the activities if you don't mind. I'm going to get there. This is one of those things where you look at the first bullet of building our district-wide curriculum alignment, development, mapping from one-year strategic plan for deeper learning and deeper assessment. Boy, it feels like that we live and exist in yellow here, or we live and exist in green because it's constant and ongoing. But you've seen Ms. Friend and the Teaching and Learning Department present to you this year on the activities around the curriculum curation and the things that we're doing in the school district. We have implemented Open SciEd, and that's operational, and there's been follow-up trainings for educators around that. And the Universal Design for Learning principles continue to be implemented across the district. The Director of Innovation and Technology has been instrumental in working with teachers on universal design approaches in the classroom as well. And so we've seen some examples of that in our district. We are, again, these are one of those you can debate, green, yellow. Implementing K-8 NRSD multi-tiered systems of support. I elected to go yellow here because why we've set up, if you will, the framework, getting to the point of where we're operational and ongoing and systematic and through full data cycles and adjustments is what teachers are going through this year through their professional development training with PLCs. They're working with our coaches, those types of things. The innovation, we have applied for the Innovation Pathway Planning Grant from Nashoba Regional High School. I have to say I have 2 pages left to go on this 55-page grant that was crafted through the leadership of Dr. Bolton and Assistant Superintendent Friend. And then we're ongoing with our digital learning best practices, as I referred to Mr. Stefanowitz, and building understanding and capacity for AI concepts, applications, and potential instructional operational benefits. Had a chance to observe a lesson in the 8th grade at Florence Sawyer School on this topic just yesterday. Fascinating. And through Canva, which is part of our data privacy agreement, so it's protected. So the teacher led the students through some AI generation to generate some conversations around how even AI has bias, cultural bias in the images that it generates, because again, the AI is only as good as the data that's inputted into it or collected. So it was a fascinating lesson talking to kids about sort of the ethics behind using AI. So we look into culture and belonging. I hope you don't mind me skipping through the standards.
No, that's fine.
As you know, we're in the process of conducting our equity audit, our surveys to parents and caregivers went out last week. Students are occurring this week. We are doing our equity walks with Dr. Mayo Brown Thursday and Friday of this week, and then again later at the end of the month. So those activities are all underway, and I know that we're going to be coming to this committee on the 28th with Dr. Mayo Brown to talk about some initial data analysis that's been done toward the audit. So the listening sessions are in here as well. Middle school advisories implemented in all 3 towns. Dr. Larry Epstein continues to work and grow the calm, compassionate teaching methodology philosophy with our educators. And then you can see these are some of the things that are implementation actions that we took as part of our strategic plan, highlighting some budgetary considerations in this. We know that we're balancing our deans across the district at this point, as well as we're balanced with our counselors across the district at this point at a rate of 250 to 1. And then the other is an academic piece of civic action projects at the middle and high school levels. It was interesting to hear our students tonight because some of the things that they brought up were actually some civic action projects that came out of the courses last spring. For instance, key cards to the school was one where I actually was interviewed about. So those things are happening. We do need to know, and this is on our list of to-dos that we need to do, is engage with our Council on Aging, and this is a good time of year to do that because I want to engage with them through this budgetary process and give an audience to that sector of our community so that they can ask some questions, so we'll be doing that. When we look at human resources, this area is really heavily focused on the work we're trying to do in building the transparency page around the Finance and Operations Office. We've also enrolled in the Massachusetts Partnership for Diversity in Education in Human Resources. I know that our Human Resource Director, Anne-Marie Stoika, has signed us up for the MPDE job fair. And we don't necessarily even have to have job openings to participate. We can go and promote our district and show candidates what Nashoba has to offer. So we're going to be participating in that activity. And the one that really should be super, super green is that we passed authorization to fund and construct a new Nashoba Regional High School. That is, while it's listed here as a superintendent goal, that was a community goal. And I'm very pleased and humbled by our communities for for passing that through. Okay, so that addresses into the goals related to the strategic plan. Now we're going to shift into the professional practice and student learning goals. There's some overlap, so perhaps, Madam Chair, I should just go ahead and do those pieces before we take questions, but
Yes.
I can pause here if you'd like
No, I
me to.
think you go right ahead.
Okay. So let's take a look at both the student learning goal and the professional practice goal. Earlier this year, Assistant Superintendent Fran and her team gave a presentation on how we're using the Renaissance Learning Platform, specifically the STAR 360 and early literacy measures, STAR 360 math and reading, to get those universal screener assessments to give us indicators of what do we need to look for more. And if you remember in that presentation, and we talked about this at goal setting time, the standard for moderate and high growth is 65% of your student body, if you're effective in your practices, should be advancing in moderate and high growth. And so we set a rigorous goal of we want 70% of our students hitting those targets. And so in doing so, we've taken several steps forward, of which we have one coming up in the next month that will wrap up the action steps around the student learning goals. Implementing the math and literacy coach model K-8 has been instrumental to the work that we've been doing. They have been key players in the development of our professional learning communities, hosting the PLC meetings, doing the data analysis, identifying where are the curriculum lags or the skill set lags that we see in our data sets so that our teachers can target instruction in the tiered 1 general setting. And so, excuse me, that data work that has been going on with the PLCs and the coaches has related directly into types of activities students are doing in all of our K-8 environments in the what I need to know block, what I need now block. So that win block has been incredibly important. We just finished the assessment window. Last Friday is when the mid-year assessment window closed. So our principals are doing their analysis and they're drilling down to get more granular in their data with their coaches and teachers to get a sense of what's happening, and they will be giving their state of the school updates at our next leadership council meeting about their mid-year learnings that they have with their teachers. So let's get into the data, since it's a data-driven goal here. So when we look first at STAR 360 reading, I'll take you to right now, the percentage of students hitting those growth targets is 70.4% in the district. Again, I want to emphasize, we set a goal that's 5 percentage points above what the recommended benchmark is, because we identified that for growth to happen and to mitigate perhaps some of the lag in learning due to the pandemic, we needed to put a stretch in there. So you can see the breakdown by schools. I think what's interesting to note, excuse the typo here, that should be 2023. You can see at this time last year, that number was 69.3% for Center School. So Center School has increased almost 5% in their growth measures from one year over the other. Florence Sawyer, you can see here, had an increase of just over 2 percentage points. Mary Rowlandson Elementary had a decrease of 0.6 of a point. Hill Middle School, an increase of almost 5 percentage points. Luther Burbank Middle School had an increase of almost 9 percentage points in their growth metrics. So in terms of why are we seeing that increase in growth in these data measures, I think it comes to the efforts that you're seeing in terms of the infrastructure that's been put into the schools relative to coaches being in there working with teachers, using the data meeting processes, using data to drive instruction, and then looking at the win block as the time to say, this is where we can get targeted and do some of that work. So when we look at STAR 360 math, our district is performing with 73% of our students are hitting the moderate and high growth targets right now. And you can see the breakdown by school. And again, we look at Center School, that has increased 0.5% from last year. Florence Sawyer School, almost 1%. Hill Middle School, you can see has increased almost 7 percentage points. Murray Rowlandson Elementary, you can see has improved over 3 percentage points. Luther Burbank Middle School improving over 4 percentage points. And Nashoba Regional High School, because the math assessment is taken into the freshman group, that growth has increased by 7 percentage points. So we're very encouraged again by the work that's being done there with our growth metrics. And with early literacy, these are the early reading indicators. We're exceeding the recommended target and approximating our 70% target right now. So as we look at that and look at these numbers relative to our numbers last year, we would see that center schools, actually their growth number has increased by 5 percentage points year over year. Still with some room to go to that next place, and these are smaller cohorts, so there's some targeted need there that's being addressed. At Florence Sawyer, approximating 77% growth target year over year is quite a challenge. So you see a decline there. They're functioning at a very high level in terms of growth around early literacy, and you can see a nearly 5-point percentage increase relative to the early literacy data at Mary Rowland Elementary School. The biggest factor that I think is involved in the growth that we're seeing early in these, it comes to one simple thing: teachers that care and it matters to them. So as they're having these data meetings and they're working together with their coaches, our teachers are really diving in, building their skills, looking at this work, working in collaborative groups to hit these common goals. So I highly commend all of our teachers for the work that they're doing in this particular area. And then the professional practice goal I spoke to as we walked through the standards is around the communication piece. The Apogee website, of course, should be green. But it's around building the professional practice goal, is around building the finance and operations transparency page, working with our town officials on the finances of the district, engaging with our constituents through our joint presentations that are going to happen at the February 27th. So all of that is the work that's in motion right now towards the professional practice goal, because as we know, this is the meaty time of year for budget. I included this last part for you to remind the committee that these are the performance standards that are outside of the goal structure. They're part of just this, the model standards. And the language here is the summary language of the 4 key standards. These are the 8 elements within those standards that this committee approved and voted upon earlier this year that are to be the key focus. And when looking at these standards, you can see I didn't put the color coding to this because these are the standards that uplift and support the work that is being done in the goals. So you can make the crossover of, yes, here's what we saw that related to instruction, assessment, data-informed decision-making, the environment, scheduling and managing information systems, the fiscal systems, sharing responsibility, and building a shared vision. I think what's key to note, and the reason why I included the exemplary language in here is because I think that's in any rubric, that's your target, that's what you're working toward. And you'll see there's a lot of language in here around building the capacity of others to lead and do the work. And that's the role of the superintendent, is I'm not the person that's going to necessarily do the data meetings. I got to create structures and build capacity in others to lead that work. So you'll see that in the language of these standards and these elements. So in summary, I thank you all, and I'm all ears to take any guidance and in terms of the types of things you're looking for relative when we come back to this conversation for the summary meeting.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Kirk, for that. Let's go around the table if anybody has any questions or recommendations.
I have some questions.
Go for it, Eve.
Okay.
My first question is about the communication with families about the screening data. I know I'd asked about this, I think, when it first rolled out. Is that just a letter being sent, or is that a conversation at parent-teacher conferences? Like, are we training parents kind of about what that means and bringing them into the process? I guess I'm curious about that. It's okay.
This is very important. And we knew it was going to be a lift for our educators. One of the things we identified very early on is that with this expectations, we're talking about our youngest learners. We're talking about our kindergartners and first graders, right? And for many people, it's their first entry into public school. So we wanted to make sure we were coming into those conversations with grace and respect to those families. So together, working with our Teachers Association, we looked at, they received calls from all the teachers prior to the letter being received, so that they could have the conversation about, okay, we don't want you to be alarmed, but you're going to receive this letter, and educate them around those particular structures. The Department of Teaching and Learning gave language and guidance to our teachers to use to do that. And then from my seat, I work closely with Mr. Cavini and our Teachers Association. They helped collect some data on the experience of our educators and what that required them to do. I heard a fun narrative the other day that for an educator that had a large number in the fall in a first grade setting, got their mid-year updates, and that number reduced drastically, and was able to say, wow, look at this, this is great news. So yes, we took a very sort of delicate approach to that. I think we want to be very anticipatory in those conversations. We also want to listen to our teachers, because when it feels like it's too big of a lift or it could be overwhelming, because we know building class lists in kindergarten and first grade are the trickiest classes to build, because they're the youngest folks that are developing and growing, and they're having all these formative experiences. So in that way, we know that our building administrators and our coaches also supported the teachers where there needed to be support with that lift.
Were those conversations also extended to the Renaissance and Star, like when things came up around those things?
No, they were not. We had the conversations with the families as required as part of the early literacy screening. Now, our teachers were provided guidance around speaking to those reports, to equip our teachers with the skills during conferences to speak to those data sets. We're going to look at our there's a 30-day requirement within that of the assessments. So we're going to look at the timing of our assessment window, and with conferences happening at the beginning of November, that might be the opportunity where actually we're able to give folks their letters and have those conferences there and experience that. So even a shift in the conferences a little bit, if we can stay within that window requirement, is going to make that efficient. So yes, we're building in everybody the language around these, because these, you know, when you're dealing with digital data sets, you can slice them 1,000 different ways. So we're doing some professional development on what are the key reports to give people so they have a generalized understanding of what their students are doing in school.
I had another question, but I'm going to let other people go with it.
I actually just wanted to continue down that pathway of, and maybe it's related to MTSS, as you are implementing interventions, if you see concerns and you start to implement interventions on whatever tier, how do you alert families that those interventions, is that an MTSS question?
Yeah, without question it is.
So how can you, or what is the plan for circling the parents into the conversation? You know, your child in the WIN block is being given this additional thing that they need, et cetera.
Yep. That's the nuanced conversations of the relationship with families that is critically important. So as we're talking about these things, there's some formalized structures. One of those formalized structures is through the student support team process, through our staff process. So that is very formalized and documented, right? When it comes to other functions, our conferences are used that way. Where there's concerns about a student and they're getting, say, an extra intervention in that way, there would be a communication with the family. I think what's important to understand about the what I need block, though, is because you're getting help or targeted instruction in a particular area during the what I need block, doesn't mean that it's an extraordinary step. What it means is we've identified that's something you need. And so we're organizing around each other as a team of educators to do that. So let's say I'm a third grader that, I'm going to really oversimplify this, a third grader learning my multiplication facts, and they're not coming along as quickly as we want. Well, maybe there's a targeted group around that. If it's a first grade group and need to do some sight word development, maybe there's some work around that. But that is tier 1 generalized instruction. That is not something to be alarmed about. Teachers have been doing that a long time. We're doing this now in a coordinated, data-driven way.
And with the next round of assessments that you're doing with the children, all the children, is the second round of conferences going to share the next round of reports out as well?
Yeah, we're prepping and giving people the language that they need to share with families as they come in, yeah.
Okay, so I'll throw it up to somebody else if there's no one else, I'll give it back to Amy.
I do have something.
Go for it.
Yeah, so I'm just curious. I know that you, with the restructuring with the dean positions at the middle schools, and that's specifically tied to social emotional development. To what extent how are we examining the efficacy of that implementation? Like, is that through Panorama survey data?
That's one place.
Okay.
We have some other data sources that we look at as well. So one of the things that principals will bring forward in their mid-year updates or referrals are going to be discipline data around that, and looking at those types of plans. So there's several pieces that the deans are working on, and that work is local to the principal and in the school and how they are looking at the dynamics of their environment around them.
But you're wondering if at the summative stage we will be seeing some of that data to depth to prove that this is a good use of resources?
You won't be able to have that at the summative stage because we won't be in those places.
Because you won't have it yet?
Yeah, because we are still going to have a month of school. Let me dig in to see how that can look.
Yeah, and I think that it just begs the broader question of how is it that we can, without invading too much, see data that shows that the resources are being well used, that the coaches are indeed the causal piece for these improvements in the data. Like, how do we know?
I'm not going to be able to show you anything on any of those positions that has a straight line of because we did that, it gave you that. You're not going to get that on any of the positions that you put in the district. What you're going to get is we've implemented these strategies and a framework around it, and it's based in proven practices in good pedagogy and leadership and education. And so what we have to analyze is the structure and the practice we're putting forward having impact in the classroom. And I hope we're looking at the data tonight that's being presented to you as it's an early indicator that there's an impact happening, because that growth data is significant, having only been in this model now for less than 100 days. And I think that's critically important to understand.
Okay, let's go over to Amy.
Yeah, I had a few notes that I took during the presentation. I'm going to start with growth because you just ended there. Could you help me understand why the growth data, like what growth represents? Because in my mind, I'm thinking of it as a measure of change over a period of time. But you're comparing this year's growth with last year's growth measurements, and so I'm just wondering, like, are we losing sight of what the
Raw score.
Yeah, what the raw scores are of showing achievement? When we're talking about growth, we're just talking about change, right? Like,
Well,
could you help me understand better why growth is the emphasis of the discussion?
In a moment, I will. Thank you for everybody's patience. And may call Assistant Superintendent Friend in on this question, but I'm going to do my best here. Achievement is important here. I think what's important to recognize in these indicator measures is they are not measures of achievement. So we cannot make achievement conclusions on these measures. These measures are an assessment of reading and math skills and the early literacy skills, which are the 5 components of reading that are based upon good reading development. So let's not sort of try to equate those two things, right? So yes, we do have the benchmark data as well. This data is being presented to you because we focus in on growth, because when we focus in on growth, that puts us in a position where we have to look at each and every school in the system. Whereas if we set our goals purely to just a line of hit that degree of proficiency, you always have a segment of students that exists so high above the proficiency that they're going to remain there. And you have a segment of students that will exist so far below the proficiency line, they will live there. So you're only, frankly, assessing and watching the middle. So we use the growth target because that ensures that we're looking at each and every student in our data sets. And those growth measure targets are segmented. And it's been a while since I read the methodology, and it's similar to the MCAS methodology. Correct me if I get this wrong. But if you think about a distribution of data and it's divided into 5 segments, your initial score in one bucket, and you can adapt this based upon whether it's a fall to spring or fall to fall or fall to winter. Your initial data set is the bucket in which you fit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Your growth data is measured against all the other data points that sit within your bucket nationally. So if Kirk Downing takes his assessment in the fall and I fall into the 3 bucket, my growth measure is compared to the performance of students that are in the 3 bucket on the next measure to ensure that we're assessing growth accordingly to where a student is relatively performing.
Okay.
So that gives us a sense, and what we do in our data meetings is we break it down. We break it down into students with IEPs, EL students. We can break it down by gender. We can break it down by race. But we can break it down through all the characteristics that tell us what we can do to get a sense of, can we identify an area or targeted need where we can put some focus into it. That is the granular work of what our principals, their coaches, and the teams will be doing in their work.
Okay, thank you. In terms of, I guess, other evidence that I would be interested in hearing more about during your the next report out, and between now and then, the digital learning position. And I don't have that slide up right now, and I don't know if I'm getting that title correct, but that position was new this year.
Yep.
Correct. I feel like it would be helpful to just get some more evidence of the kind of changes that have been implemented. I know you had one bullet point about it, but I feel like that's a really important aspect of the strategic plan that's been implemented, and it would be helpful to get more
Great. You can do that.
information on that. Also, the equity audit, I know has been kind of a multi-year want, and we're making it happen this year, and I think part of the evidence that's presented to the school committee, for me, it would be very important to know the participation level in the community of this survey that went out, because I feel like the whole point of the equity audit is to get input from the community, you know, that
I can tell you
influences.
now we got nearly 400 responses.
Really?
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
400 responses, and so I guess we have, what, 3,000 students or something?
Yeah. Just under 2,000 families.
Right, but it's per student. You're looking for responses per student,
Yes.
for sure. So,
In terms of dipsticks on surveys of that nature, that's a healthy number.
Okay.
And our we have 3 appearances of our folks that are going to be coming that can speak to that as well.
Okay, great. I guess my last point is that as a first strategic plan that is really trying to be data focused, I wonder how the school committee can learn some of the findings of these state of the school presentations that are given to the administration without violating any privacy or divulging information that would, put students at risk. I just feel like that would be useful data to include.
I have a thought on that.
Okay.
I think perhaps as we do our state of the school summaries and at the summer retreat, bringing a summary report on that to the school committee retreat seems to be the perfect arrangement to do that with.
I think Amy was thinking maybe before the evaluation. Is that something that happens in the midst? I mean, are you talking about the share out that happens soon?
We don't, but that's a formative share out, so it's like assessing the race car while it's still in the shop.
So it's just not ready?
No, and I think the evidence that what you're seeing again is to say, as you look at the language of how it's written, is around the leading, empowering, and guiding people to do that work. So as you see the evidence of that, that's what you're assessing. Is that happening? So definitely, I think there are some opportunities to share what we're talking about. And I know we're planning a share out in terms of what we're learning from our mid-year update, and that could be incorporated into that.
That would be great.
Yeah, we can fold that in because I think that's very reasonable to do in terms of what do we learn mid-year. Because what I gave you tonight is very 30,000 foot district-wide and some basic school-wide numbers.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'm going to go back to maybe Amy Vessels. Do you have, or did somebody else have anything else? Joe? Mike, you want to go next?
Yes, I had a couple thoughts.
Okay.
One was sort of building off of the theme of the questioning around the student learning goal. I wonder, and I apologize if it sounds sort of nebulous, I'm sort of trying to figure out how this would happen, but part of looking at student progress and evaluating tiered supports is understanding our current interventions. And we talked a little bit about, having a difficult time drawing a straight line between this intervention yielding this result. Is there an opportunity or a pathway through which we can look at our interventions and say, we either, again, I know we sort of spoke to this, we either know that this is an effective tool or have the courage to say, this has been a tried intervention, we've had this for years, and we're going to set this aside for now because this is not having the impact that we wanted. We want to create space for maybe more creative and maybe research-based interventions. I don't know if that's something that would be part of your student learning goal. It feels like kind of a critical evaluation of our interventions would be connected with that, but I wonder if you could speak to that.
So I want to make sure I'm very specific about this. Intervention to outcome, that is a straight line you can make. It's general position of, say, like a coach to, so it's position, person, job title isn't the direct line. Direct intervention, so an intervention out in the world that many educators use, for instance, like a read naturally intervention, right? You can make a direct line of, has done X number of sessions on this online digital intervention and it's yielded this progress, right? That can happen. So as we're building our MTSS structures, that's exactly the type of things we need to do, Mr. Rush. We need to, because I think the metrics that you ultimately see in one metric that I'm going to want to learn more about at our winter updates is requests and entry into our student support teams and the stat teams in our buildings. Because I had a meeting at one school last week where they said, we're studying the numbers now, but we're seeing openings on our stat calendar where we haven't seen that before. So students are not being advanced forward to that methodology as much as they were in the past, because in their data meetings and in their win time, they're getting those needs addressed. So they're not advancing forward, we need to do something else, because that's where the focus on the tier 1 really needs to be. And when you build an effective multi-tiered support system, you don't run the focus on the interventions first. You focus on the tier 1 core instruction first as being highly effective, because from that you have an understanding of, we were able to address this sort of basket through improving high quality tier 1, thus giving us better opportunity to intervene where necessary.
And what?
So we'll be tracking that kind of through progress monitoring tools. So, like for instance, our Renaissance Learning has progress monitoring tools within them that you can issue those assessments weekly, bi-weekly, to give you a sense of the trend line. And so that's what we'll be moving. So, for instance, for let's say we have a second grade student that is accessing text and reading text and able to take fluency measures, but the prosody isn't coming along, we can do weekly fluency measures to see, are they improving in their fluency relative to the instruction that's being provided.
And so to build off of that, I know that interventions are resource intensive, right? So when you implement an intervention, it requires time and personnel and space. And so I'm wondering, in that evaluation, can you collect data about interventions that are no longer providing the impact that we hoped that it would, so that we can demonstrate that we are clearing that space up for a new model? That makes sense?
Yes.
I've always felt like districts are kind of afraid to try something and then look back and say, you know what, despite our best intentions, it's not working. And we need to cut bait because we have student outcomes that are at risk here.
Right.
So I just feel like that data collection that you're talking about can identify the successes and the challenges that still remain.
Couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah.
And there is a nuance to interventions that has to be looked at as well. And that is, we don't want to fall into a trap of, we have intervention A, B, and C. We first try A. And you get A the way every kid that came through got A. Worked, you go this way. Didn't work, you go to B. And then we do it the same way we do with every kid. Worked for these, then you go to C. I don't want that kind of model. I don't ever want that kind of model for our school system. I want, here's that model, and it could be effective for some, but the intervention might have to be something even drastically different than for others. I'll give you an extreme example that I have an example with in my career, that a savvy person that knew a lot about vision issues was able to pick up. And examining how the student was reading, you know how you look at images and you see the inverse space? You know, sometimes you see the queen and then you see the woman with the apple, right? That kind of image. Came to learn that this student was reading the white space. Wasn't reading the print. That's the way the student's brain worked. Isn't that wild to think about? I've seen this once in my career. And a tinted overlay put over that closed out the white space. And when this particular person did this particular teacher did this, he said, oh, look at all the black marks. Right? Wild, isn't it, to think about that? So we have those little moments like that where he would not have fit into try intervention A, try intervention B, try intervention C. There has to be room for that creativity to think, what is the thing that's missing here? So it's both. It's both.
Thanks.
Amy, it's back to you.
So I had some questions about the science curriculum development. It says 6 through 12, 3 units are being revised. So they're in the revision process. Is that correct at this point?
Do you want to talk to this one?
Well, the open SciEd in 6 through 8 is being implemented 2 units this year. over time, over 3 years, there will be 6 units. So essentially right now, we're implementing 2 open SciEd units at each grade level and 4 Nashoba units.
And that's at the high school as well?
This is 6 through 8.
Okay.
So our middle school teachers are both implementing open SciEd and continuing to strengthen our Nashoba units until we can get to full implementation. At the high school, we're in phase 1 of the curriculum review process. So they have 2 tasks. One is to work on their current curriculum, to develop and evolve 3 units. And they're working on investigating and researching our current practice, their current practice, and how it aligns with the instructional vision which they've developed. After February vacation, families are going to see a thought exchange relative to their experience in 9 through 12 science, similar to our K-5 literacy thought exchange. And Candace McBurdy, our curriculum director for math and science, has been working with Linda Pierre, department head, and the high school science team, and they've come up with some incredible questions. And they're also surveying all students in all of the science classes as well. So I would be happy to share out on that after February vacation, if appropriate and the committee would allow. So right now, in this phase for 9 through 12 science, they're just investigating. Where do we want to be? What are we already doing that's effective? How do we know? What are our families telling us? What are our students telling us? What do we think as teachers? And then next year, they'll go into phase 2 around making recommendations for potential changes in curriculum, resources, course programming, sequencing, and all of that that's appropriate for the high school, which is not appropriate for K-8.
Yeah, I'd be curious about those conversations. I would love to hear kind of what has come out of those.
Survey.
Yeah, and the conversations that they're having around that. Yeah, be very interested too.
Yeah, I mean, that would be exceptional evidence for that particular goal.
And I just have to compliment the high school science team because they're the first to go through this kind of process where in the past it's been really a textbook replacement process. So this idea of defining an instructional vision for the high school science department that aligns with the mission of the school and the district, that's a different kind of process that's unfamiliar to the team, is unfamiliar to all of us, and they've embraced it. And Ms. McBurdy has been working with the team on developing the questions for the survey, and I just have to say that I was so impressed in questions that were really thoughtful, and I'm glad that the team was tasked with generating the questions because I know I would have come up with different questions, and their questions are far better than the questions that I would have come up with for them, so I'm happy to share.
Yeah.
And it's a process, but we're in it.
Yeah, I guess my last question is about like evidence of, like I said, our goal was like deeper learning, deeper assessment. So I know we were trying to like move away from traditional assessments or whatever, and I'm just curious what work has been done because I know the student representative brought this up as well. So I'm really curious about what movement or what progress has been made along those lines and seeing, I guess, some examples of that. Yeah.
Great.
Noted, thank you.
Just going to go down the line, see if there's anybody else who wants to ask a question.
I have one more thing.
Back up, here we go.
One more thing, and then I'm done, I promise. I'm looking at the professional practice goal and the second goal about the Transparency Center. I always assume that the Transparency Center, and it actually may be there, but it doesn't feel intuitive if it is there, that it would actually be a subheading on the website where you would go there and you would pull down and you would see. I know that the finance department has budgets and audits. We do have contracts on the website, but they're all archived.
Right.
And also the presentations, all these presentations that you put together that have been wonderfully informative, those are also available, but only by going back on old school committee meetings. And many of them are
Right,
archived. I
like
think.
the old school, hit the toggles, find it, yeah.
Right. So it would be really nice to have a formal, like, this is our
that's what
transparency center, and then here are all of its little
Yep.
subtopics.
Yep. And that is one of the things that Ms. Hannigan is working with us on as well.
Okay.
So she has an aptitude for such things. So, Mr. Bresch, I believe you just nominated yourself as the review person. As
Sure. Sure, let's do it.
Good job.
Why not?
One last thought is that it would be really nice to be able to capture the meeting that just took place, and the report that we just got from the student representatives about some of the issues they've, brought to the school committee, the culture and belonging. I feel like you're already doing the work that the work has already started, but it's not captured in here at all. So if you could somehow put a bullet point, add a bullet point to the culture and belonging slide that captures some of the work that's starting with the school committee and the exchange that just took place. Student council. Related to culture and belonging goals.
Student voice, student agency.
Yeah, somewhere.
It's all in there.
Well, so I'm just trying to, this is a formality question, I think it's a good idea. That's new work compared to where we voted goals and the action steps of what that would be, but I think, as I'm looking into the standards.
Yeah, I was just reading through what the approved goals already were for culture and belonging, and I felt like maybe you could capture it within there,
Yeah, let me see how
since
how
it's work
gets
that's
captured.
already underway.
I mean, I think of it more of an action step
That's what that's what I meant.
that weren't voted. And so
Right,
you could
and
just,
it's an action
just
step.
another piece of
But
evidence of what you're
Yeah,
doing.
it's another piece of evidence and it can be tied into the standard elements as well.
That's what I meant by bullet. Sorry.
Yeah.
All right, guys, so that was another enormous presentation by our superintendent. Thank you, Kirk. Very comprehensive, lots going on.
Can I just ask the committee's feedback? So like, I took a different strategy this year. I think I just confused everybody last year. So in terms of this strategy, was this effective for you to understand what we've done thus far?
Much cleaner.
Format.
Yeah,
Okay.
I like this one.
So
It's very straightforward.
think about this for the future. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, there are times in the presentation, Kirk, where I am just like, oh, my head's gonna explode. So, I'm not making light. I think you guys are just, again, doing amazing things for our kids. As we know, guys, our job is to make sure that that's being brought down to the kid. Like, that the kids are actually feeling it. So we will see at the summative evaluation the completion of that work. But for now, we're going to move on with the agenda. And we are going to move on to the star, the darling of our show. Sorry, Kirk, but it is the budget update.
It is the budget update.
Yeah, that's next, guys. So,
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to welcome our Finance and Operations Director, Ross Mulcairn, to provide an introduction for you.
So, good evening, everyone. Thank you to the school committee for. Sorry, I'm not trying to look clicker. There we go. Thank you. So, thank you to the school committee for the opportunity this evening to share our updates to the proposed FY25 budget, and also thank Renan Ansusau, who's our assistant director in the Finance and Operations office, for being here. He's a great note taker. And just like we did after the budget workshop, we'll sit down tomorrow with Superintendent Downing and break down the notes and feedback and questions from the committee so we can build those into our future presentations and or iterations of the budget. So I appreciate being here for our team effort.
If you don't mind,
Yep.
Mr. Mulcairn and I are in our office going through the budget item by item, line by line. Renan is with us, and he's doing all the cross-checking in the computers over all the things that we're going, and the contribution that he has made to this work cannot be overstated. So thank you.
Thank you. He's a lot. So as we begin, I want to take a just brief look at our work to date on the FY25 proposed budget. As you can see by our completed and marked tasks here, we've made it quite a way of work that's been involved, not only within the superintendent's office, but across departments and within the buildings as well, as we build this budget. The title on the left-hand side does do a direct link. I know this is a little small to compress it onto one slide, but the title on the left-hand side is a direct link to the budget timeline. So, Superintendent Downing.
Going with another wasn't sure, so forgive me. I'm trying not to be rude. We're going to take a look at the proposed budget from the budget workshop. We've also received information from the governor's budget and the initial cherry sheets and the impact to that budget. We're going to talk about further adjustments we've made since our last meeting. And then we're going to talk about other considerations and unresolved factors because we've been having some conversations with our local officials, and we want to brief you on those conversations as well.
And just briefly, as you recall from the budget workshop, our operating budget and total budget are reflected here. We also this year in our budget workshop began to present our operating budget, capital debt assessment, and total assessments separately for each of the three towns for a visual cue. As we bring in capital debt for the new high school, that's obviously going to increase the assessments to the towns. We want to separate out the operating budget assessment in the sense of what does this mean to our towns. So again, this is a reflection of what was presented a few weeks ago. So our unresolved budget factors that we finished our workshop with a few weeks ago that we were expecting would impact the proposed budget. We're going to report the results and status of those factors throughout tonight's updated proposed budget presentation, and also, like Superintendent Downing said, talk about what our next unresolved factors would be at the end of this presentation. So just a quick and minor update that we're presenting is the correction to the MRE, Mary Rowlandson Elementary School budget. You remember there was some missing fields on the link table, so we updated that, and it's a correction of increase of just over $42,000 to that non-salary budget for MRE. We obviously want to make sure our students have everything they need, and we used our per pupil figures as a double check. So again, that's just a slight increase to the overall operating budget going into tonight.
So let's talk about the governor's budget's impact. So the governor did release her budget in the past 2 weeks, and we were able to get all of our state aid numbers as well as our foundation enrollment numbers in. And I'll just be straightforward, the news was not good for us. And I want to explain why. As you'll see, our Chapter 78 that we were anticipating, we thought we were taking a conservative estimate of this based upon the most recent years of SOA dollars. We anticipated 10.3 million, and it came in at 9.8 and change. And in looking into the rationale of why that happened, this is a direct result of declining enrollment in the district. So what happens in declining enrollment, the way Chapter 70 is built, is you get a minimum of $30 per pupil increase over your foundation budget from the previous year. So your budget will always go up. We were put into this situation because we had declining enrollment of what is called safe harbor, meaning we don't want because your budget isn't going to go down in the enrollment, you are put into the safe harbor category. And when you're placed in the safe harbor category, you only get the minimum increase of $30 per student. And our foundation enrollment this year went down from 3,107 to 3,078. 212 districts had the same experience that we had this year. And the other major factor that was in terms of the Chapter 78 is inflation over the past years, as you know, has really stabilized relative to the peak that it was at post-pandemic. The past 2 years, the entire Chapter 70 bucket of funds was raised at the statutory limit of 4.5% for all schools in Massachusetts 2 years in a row. This year, the inflation increase that was used for Chapter 70 was 1.3%. So the entire pool of Chapter 70 funds for Massachusetts School did not increase at the same rate as those others. So when you combine in regional transportation charter school reimbursement, you can see the net effect of our state aid numbers was that it was $592,000 below what our revenue projections were to you in the most recent meeting.
So again, it does not change our operating budget, right? Because we're not changing our costs. So this is just the adjustment with MRE reflected again. Where we see the impact is on our operating budget assessments, because now we have less state aid and revenue coming in that increases the local assessments to our member towns in the form of the operating budget changes you can see here from 24 to 25 in the proposed budget. Also in this factor is our foundation enrollment is now calculated in here, and again we have some changes in our foundation enrollment across the towns as we do every year, but that puts us in our percentages per the regional agreement, so you can see the result of the reduced revenue and reimbursement from the state, along with our foundation enrollment shifts that happen year to year.
So as you look at those rates that were there, having had initial conversations with our town officials, the town administrators, we know that we have to look places to reduce the cost of this budget, because those assessment rates would push our towns into unattainable positions. So we went back to the drawing board, and well, before I get there, I'm going to step ahead of myself. Concurrently, we got some good news along the way. Aspa Valley Collaborative is the negotiating party for our specialized transportation for special education students who need out-of-district transportation. And in the bid documents, we were up for bid this year, and in the bid documents, we had several board meetings where we discussed the specificity around the bid documents, whereas in the past for out-of-district students were based on routes. We wanted that shifted to vans. So cheaper costs per route, but depending on how those routes were staffed, the cost of a bus, of a van, was dramatically higher. And so the new pricing model is the cost of a van, and then the district shares that when you have shared students. So let's say, for instance, 2 students are picked up in Nashoba, 2 students are picked up in, say, Maynard, and they go to another location. Nashoba and Maynard would share the cost of that van. So in doing that methodology, along with ADC in the Nashoba, through the ADC contract, is going to be working with a new vendor to our school system. This company is called OWIS, and they've been working in towns up in the Merrimack Valley and north.
Andover area.
Yep. And so they're bringing a satellite office to Marlboro. What we're really encouraged about with this company is that they didn't bid the whole bid. There's 7 bid packages when you have the collaborative. They just bid 2, Northborough, Southborough, and Nashoba, because they are building a slow growth model. So these were all reviewed by our committee. The bottom line is our special education transportation costs, after those were negotiated, we analyzed the routes, we estimate at $480,000 lower than what we projected for you in January. Added district tuitions, you can see, we were able to reduce by $63,000 because we were building 6% increases in added district tuition costs. The OSD office came out with recommended increase rates of 4.7%. So we adjusted our measures to 5% because out of districts can go above that rate, but it's the rate at which the state will reimburse, and there's rules around that. So we lowered that percentage from 6% to 5%, and that's where you're seeing that $63,000 come there. So you can see where we had the unfortunate in the governor's budget and Chapter 70 state aid dollars of being $592,000 short. We were able to recover $544,000 through the negotiation of these transportation contracts and the efficiency of those. Mr. McCarron.
Yeah, okay, so just as Superintendent Downing said, the total decrease due to the updates to the special education budget is reflected here, and the operating, obviously the total budget, but most importantly, this is where it brings our operating assessment to for each of our member towns. Again, that capital debt assessment is not going to change because it's tied to our debt payment, but you'll start to see the updates to the operating budget assessment and therefore the total assessment in each of our towns. But again, right now we're really focusing on what the changes are in each iteration here of the operating budget assessment because that's really comparing apples to apples when we're thinking about year to year.
Looking at those assessments, we know we still have some more work to do from there. So as a cabinet team, we gathered and we said, what are the contracts, the initiatives that we're trying to advance that we can delay and look at. So we were able to examine those budgets and looking at some technology adjustments and facilities adjustments. You can see we were able to reduce those budget asks by $188,000, and you'll see the detail of that. It involves some computer software changes. These are changes at the special education software that we use for the development of IEPs, as well as some human resources software. We're not happy with the programs that we have today. Can live with them for another year. We have to live with them. We know how to use them. There is the advent of a new IEP requirements that are coming along through the state, and so we wanted to use this moment in time to take advantage of that. And the fact of the matter is, I think we're just going to have to continue on with the current system, which will be equipped with all the things that we need to do to meet the new state requirements. But it basically means that when we're able to make that leap into a new system, we're going to have to do double training again. So we're trying to take advantage of the moment of doing a training once in a new platform, and we're sacrificing the fact that we're going to have to avoid that. So that, you'll see there's some scheduled maintenance reductions that Mr. Freeze brought forward to us. We looked at the supplies, snow removal, after talking to our vendors on those contracts. They're not expecting any increases, so that was good. They got back to us on that. So those total reductions would equal $188,500.
Okay, so we're going to follow the same pattern here. Again, we see the reduction of over $188,000 in the operating and total budget. Therefore, we see a decrease in our assessment to member towns. So just to call back to the previous assessment prior to these technology and facility adjustments, Bolton's operating assessment was at 7.72, Lancaster's is at 9.33, and Stowe's was at 6.21. So we're seeing, a portion of a percentage decrease due to these adjustments.
Okay, so now we go to another look at that and say, let's take a look at the ask that we put forward and talk to you about in January and say, what can we live with here? So there were two particular elements that were in the budget. We wanted to bring in an ELIA for the town of Lancaster to support the English Learner Program in Lancaster. We are currently meeting the needs according to the requirements of our English learners within the district. The idea of bringing in the aid would give an opportunity to do the inclusion supports with our students when they're not getting their services delivered, as a way to help them bring their language development skills from their language class into the general setting. The other piece is, we talked about the primary connections program at Center School in Stowe, servicing K1 and 2 students. And in pulling that, there's a program we currently don't have. And as we've talked about, this is a good program to have in anticipation of the students that could possibly be placed there rather than be serviced out of district. What we're going to be able to do with our Connections program that we've done at times when we've needed to is for second grade students, they can participate in the intermediate Connections programs that currently exist at the school, because there's a 48-month window that of students that can exist within a program according to regulations. We would still have to work with kindergarten students and first grade students under the conditions and the methodologies that we're currently using today. So when we look at bringing those back out of the budget, and I want to emphasize that these things aren't IEP or EL enrollment specific requests. These are the things we're anticipating in the event that we have some like students come through that we need to address. What's tricky, they're 5 and 6 years old. So we have some students in our preschool setting right now that present in ways that tell us, well, we can meet their needs, but sometimes those needs shift and change, and we have to be adaptable to that. So I'm confident we can continue to work on that, but this is a priority we need to do and get this established. So when we do that, that's another reduction in personnel of $157,000. This is not any current personnel in the district. This was proposed.
So there's the reflection, again, of the reduction in the operating budget per those adjustments. And here we see the reflection in the operating budget assessments to the towns, and obviously the overall total assessments to our towns. It's about 1/3% for each one of the towns with this adjustment.
So you can see with that work done, with the things that we've done in the last few weeks, it gets us to this place of a Bolton increase of 7.6%, Lancaster 7.06 in Bolton, Lancaster 8.6, and an increase of 5.5%. Unintentionally, there was a piece that I wasn't able to explain. We're going to go into detail in this in our joint meeting with the 3 towns on February 27th. Another factor that impacts the town of Lancaster much, much differently than the town of Stowe is that when you get your state aid numbers, you also get your minimum local contribution numbers. And the towns of Bolton and Stowe, because of the equalization value of those towns, they're at the ceiling of 82.5%. So their increases can't increase year over year. They're at the ceiling. Whereas the town of Lancaster is hovering near 70% right now. So as the valuation of the town of Lancaster goes up through the metrics of the state, there's no ceiling to stop their minimum local contribution requirement from increasing. So as a result, that affects the proportion of which our town share. In addition to that, the town of Lancaster, relative to the other 2 towns and their enrollment numbers, is increasing in relative proportion to Bolton and Stowe. I've reported back to this committee now 3 years in a row on that trend to paint that out. So that's something that we continue to monitor, and all of those changes are not factors that we in the school district control. They're based on minimum local contribution and also how we fund our schools and the assessments through the regional agreement. So as we look at this particular slide, this is where our assessments lie. And so as we look at this, you can see this would be tough for our towns to achieve. And so Mr. Mulcairn and I scheduled 2 to 1 meetings with our town officials, and we met with them this past week to go over the situation that we are in our budgets and present to them sort of the factors and variables that we're dealing with, and we learn from them, of which I will allow them to present that to their boards. I'm not here to present their factors. We know that we need to go lower in these percentages. So the question really comes next. So before we talk about the types of levers that we have, let's just try to identify what's the amount that we need to close to get to. So Mr. Mulcairn, if you can walk through those slides, please.
So we took it in 3 different scenarios. In each iteration, in each scenario, we reduced the overall operating budget by $500,000. So here you can see scenario reduction number 1 of $500,000, and then therefore the operating budget assessment. For each scenario reduction of about 500,000, you'll see an approximate decrease of about 1% on each of our operating budget assessments for our towns. So this is what a reduction of 500,000 would look like. Again, I don't need to explain that part, but here's what a $1 million reduction would look like. And finally, what a $1.5 million reduction would look like to the operating budget assessments for each of our member towns. Again, capital debt holds steady, but it does impact the overall total assessment to our towns.
So if you can stay here on that slide. So as we look at these percentage increases, and we spoke to our towns, this is getting within the parameters that they discussed with us around those limitations, knowing that there may be some stretches still to go. We're now in the approximation place of where we need to be. And so it's coming out of this with the realization that for us to advance a budget forward, of which our local officials are telling us they can advance forward in their budgets, we need to look at closing a gap of $1.5 million in our budget. So I don't have those proposed closures for you tonight. We will have them February 28th. As a matter of fact, when we post our meeting materials for the February 28th meeting, we will be taking a truncated version of that with some of the educational pieces that we're going to have on the regional agreement to the joint meeting. So that'll be our first run at showing some of that material. All that information will be shared with this committee prior to that meeting. However, just be aware, you as a committee will not have the opportunity to debate and deliberate on those things until Wednesday night, February 28th. So materials are released Monday the 26th. We have the joint meeting Tuesday the 27th. This committee deliberates on February 28th. So,
And just to continue that timeline, we said the hearing would be on the 6th.
well, let's get to that in a minute. And we'll get to that. So, in terms of our goal in coming back to you on the 28th is there's still some unresolved factors in insurance and benefits. Mr. Mulcairn, do you want to talk to that committee?
Yeah, so the obviously the insurance and benefits are mostly made up of our health insurance, but also our operational insurance. So that's things like workers' comp insurance, the insurance we have on our vehicles, insurance on buildings. So I put that in the bucket of operational insurance. So we'll know more about that by the 28th, we're hoping. But we also have our health insurance rates coming in before then, but there's also again, potential changes to the current plans through the Insurance Advisory Committee, which is meeting next Wednesday afternoon. So we'll see, based on what feedback we get from that group and what direction that might be headed, what the impact would be.
So as we get more definition to that, another area that we're going to examine and study very, very closely is as we have our class size standards that I've educated this committee on many times. We got to look at the sections, particularly I explained the sections in Lancaster were based upon some growth models in those towns that would have to actualize to get to those places, as well as we are taking in our kindergarten enrollments to date. And so that is beginning to level off. And so we're going to look at those class size standards, and we're looking at them K to 12. We're looking at our sections and our enrollment sizes at the high school as well. High school is complicated, as anyone who works in a high school knows. We'll give you an example. A science department to meet highly qualified teaching requirements, you have to either have your generalized license or say your physics license to teach physics, biology to teach biology, chemistry to teach chemistry. And so it pins us in different ways than say a high school English department does, can span the curriculum. And so there's a lot of complexities when it comes to looking at the high school, but I'm working with Dr. Bolton closely on that. And then we're looking at that also at the middle school. We're looking at our related arts schedules for optimizations as well, so that we can understand, are there some places where we can do contraction without compromising programming? Because I think we need to make sure that we're delivering that educational program that we promise that we're buying for our students. So that work is underway right now and is unpolished at the moment, but will be polished up with a recommendation to move forward at the end of the month. Another bucket that we're looking at is around extracurricular advisor stipends. Is this the point in time where we begin to look at a fee-based model for extracurricular activities, where that does not exist today. We are in a fee-based model for athletics currently. You'll notice earlier the T&L department budget was not in the slide around some departmental budgets that we went back to sharpen the pencil on. And the reason why is because since the last meeting, we did receive the unfortunate news that we did not receive the high quality instructional materials grant for our K-5 literacy program. And as you know, that was going to pay for approximately 50% of our program that were coming in, so we only budgeted 50% in the budget. And so right now, Assistant Superintendent Friend is investigating options in terms of what we can do with our vendors, and so we're sort of reimagining. Our goal is to do a K-5 implementation of these materials next year. We're strategizing on how to do that and fund it within the constraints of the budget that we have now. So we're examining the teaching and learning budget at the moment. We will come back to this committee with what steps we can take relative to all these factors playing together. And then I'm going to turn it back to Mr. Mulcairn to talk about the excess and deficiency certification.
Sure. So for those of you who've been on the committee, this is a time of the year where we're waiting the certification of our excess and deficiency fund from the Department of Revenue. We expect to receive our certification prior to the next budget update at the February 28th school committee meeting. As I presented back in December on the 13th, at that meeting, we expect our E&D fund balance to be certified at approximately $2.3 million. While the expected increase to the fund does present an opportunity for additional budget offset, caution should be applied when considering an increased utilization of the fund to the operating budget. First, the first reason being our excess and deficiency balance is part of, not the whole, but it's part of the credit rating process as we continue our bonding for the new high school project and that borrowing. And then secondly, and we signaled this through the budget book last year as well to some degree, is that the fund is not a guaranteed revenue source year to year. The major components of the fund are the remaining balance that might be left, operating budget surplus, and any additional revenue that comes in over expectation. All those factors fluctuate year to year and cannot, again, not be a guaranteed revenue source year to year. So essentially, the higher the appropriation of excess and deficiency, the greater the risk to the FY26 budget and then future budgets beyond.
All right, last slide.
So just in brief, and again, if someone clicks the budget timeline, you can get a little bit more in depth, but we've updated the dates, and we just would want to signal, obviously, that our budget presentations to those town-based FinComs and budget advisories are coming up right after the February break, as well as a budget update number 2 to this committee. Then, again, we expect to have our E&D certified by the end of next month, which would basically put us at the next meeting. And then the future meetings with regards to the budget update number 3, public hearing, and the school committee vote would be on the 13th, which puts it prior to March 15th.
So, Madam Chair, this brings me now to the question that you asked earlier, and that is, we've had a placeholder on our planning calendar for the March 6th date, and I think it would be prudent at this time to consider adding that date to our meeting calendar. As we work on these variables over the next 3 weeks, I think we can all see a plausible path that where we come back on February 28th and present the work to date to this committee, this committee may charge us to keep working. And we also need to think about our hearing date. Our hearing date is scheduled for the 13th with a vote that same evening. And so I think there are options to consider. And Madam Chair, I would turn that over to you to present to the committee, and Mr. Gleason has some, Attorney Gleason has some expertise in this area in terms of sort of when the committee can vote relative to the budget hearing and those types of things. So with that, we've concluded the presentation, and we'll entertain any questions. I would ask that maybe we start with the question on March 6th and the calendar, so that Ms. Masterson can go ahead and post the budget hearing.
Alita, we need 2 weeks notice for the budget hearing?
14 days.
Yeah, I usually give a little bit more because our newspapers are kind of wonky about when they send out editions and stuff.
So everybody, I think it is prudent for us to hold that additional meeting on March 6th, and that we move the budget hearing to the 6th to give the community an opportunity to provide feedback if they so choose, well before the voting moment of March 13th. So that would be a virtual meeting. March 6th would be, to make it as easy as possible. Can I get a quorum for that date? Let's go around. Sharon, could you add that? I can add it. Can you add it, Amy? Yes. Joe? Mike?
Yes, I've already added it.
Thanks, Amy. Scott's good. Dina, yeah. And Karen and Chandra perhaps will also get in on that. So, Alita, let's make the 6th the hearing. And then the planning calendar is up, guys, and the 6th is already on it. So there might be a couple of other items of business that need to be managed that day at the 6th, but it'll be a relatively, we'll try to keep it as brief as possible.
Yes, we'll have the budget hearing. It's my request, Madam Chair, that after the budget hearing, you open a school committee meeting. So to give the committee any chance to deliberate on the things that they've learned and heard about, so we understand and know what our instructions are coming back to the committee on the 13th.
And my recollection is that the budget hearing does have a presentation component from you.
Correct.
To start.
Yes, we will give a generalized presentation. We will not be giving the full-blown sector by sector presentation in the community. We're going through the financials, the basic financials at the budget hearing.
So hearing at 6:30, and then perhaps meeting convenes at 7.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm in favor of that 100%. I guess I have some questions on the timeline for the tri-town meeting, or whatever we're calling the meeting that's scheduled for.
The joint FinCom meeting.
Yes, that's, I like that better. Joint FinCom meeting on February 28th. 7th?
27th?
27th.
February 27th, because I'm a little concerned with so many things in play that the presentation, the information that's available at that time to them is subject to change. So I'm just kind of wondering, like, do we have an opportunity to bump that back, or does it still serve the purpose it's
Yes.
supposed to be serving if we have a meeting on the 27th with so many factors in play?
The function of this meeting, if you recall, this is something that I instituted when I came in. The function of this meeting is to engage our 3 finance committees to comment on the budget outside of the budget hearing and be able to ask some detailed questions about how we constructed the budget. So these are opportunities to educate our community about the regional agreement and how the budget is constructed. And so that'll still be fine at that point, because we have to remember, in terms of advancing the budget forward, it is this body that advances the budget forward. And it's from those conversations that we will host publicly that we learn about the needs of from the representatives in our finance committees, because we're doing the work with our town administrators right now. Because I should just note that on our calendars on Monday the 27th, we are scheduled to meet with the town administrators again to go through this process again. So we will have gone through that process prior to posting the materials, prior to meeting with the finance committees. So we're going through several steps of measurement and thoroughness to get to that place. So I think it'll be okay. I just want to make sure that the information we provide to them and the materials they will receive prior to their meeting when we post them to the school committee agenda, and then of course the truncated presentation. This year the meeting is being hosted by the town of Lancaster, so we've been in conversations with Mr. Trussell about that meeting, and he's aware of that as well.
So let's transition to any comments, questions about the budget update. Go ahead, Scott.
So I'm just trying to process, figure out where the school committee is fitting into the whole process, because it doesn't feel like we have a lot of input right now as far as, you know, how much we think you should be spending, what programs we think are more important or less important. You know, you said you've gone to the town finance committees to get the town administrators to get their input. I think that's great. You know, and so you've identified $1.5 million you need to find in the budget. But what if the school committee thinks that that's whatever cuts need to be made to get there is too much, will be too impactful to our programs, and so we don't want you to cut $1.5 million. You know, are you going to give us that opportunity to say, you know, no, don't cut the $400,000 for high quality instructional materials, which is probably something you're going to have to do to get to $1.5 million. Find, you know, spend that $400,000, say instead of cutting 1.5, cut 1.1 million. Where does the school committee get that input in this process?
That's exactly why we added the meeting just now. It's because on the 28th, that's what you get. And we say, these are the recommendations that we're bringing forward to you on how we're advancing the school district. And in the recommendation you're going to get is the recommendation that's crafted by the team in the best interest of students for advancing their learning. So you're not going to get something that says, you know, well, this is the things that are nice, suggestions. You're going to get, this is what we believe is the best pathway to get to that place based on our strategic work. And then we deliberate at that time. And so from those deliberations, if there's work to do from that, that's where we come back on the 6th, we host our budget hearing, and we deliberate again after the budget hearing. So, and this is where I have a question for Attorney Gleason, because I believe this is accurate, but I want you to correct me if I'm wrong here. From the budget hearing and the school committee discussion, what we bring forward the next week, if it changes in terms of the number for the voted budget, that's the prerogative of the school committee.
Correct.
So that gives us 3 opportunities then to do exactly the thing that you're talking about.
I would say too, Scott, that right now is your opportunity as well. So if there's something that you say it.
I don't feel like I have enough information right now to make make those kinds of provide those kinds of inputs. I think the superintendent needs to provide us with, you know, to save $1.5 million. Here's the 5 things you're going to need to do, but and these are the dollars associated with each one of those, and therefore we can say, well, A, C, and D, don't cut those, and we'll have to deal with the tax, you know, the voters to make sure we can get that budget passed accordingly. But that's the kind of input we need. Is like, okay, in order to save that $1.5 million, this is what you're going to have to do.
So in the budgetary process, this is the place that we find ourselves annually, because we have unresolved factors yet. So depending on where certain numbers are, well, then you have to use less of others or maybe cut in. So we got to get those things solid. And once we get the data in those things, as we talked about, like insurance and benefits, I know we're doing a revisit to the school choice offset as well. So we have some things that still need to come into the barn. That's going to be the 28th. We're confident by that time we're going to have those unresolved factors there. So you will have the list of recommendations of what we need to do to get to that place.
I mean, there were only 10, 20 kids who came through school choice, so that's not going to be a huge revenue driver, but it's something, right? Okay.
Yeah, so I'll be sitting with Kathleen Leonardi, who's our data specialist, this Friday, to go kid by kid and understand costs associated with students going out and also students coming in, because we also, the committee remembers back into April, during the time frame of deliberation around school choice, is they have to consider what the special education offsets and or costs may be within each one of our students.
So the 28th. Any other questions or comments about this presentation? Yeah, Mike.
2 comments and a question. The first comment is the presentation was difficult news, but also really clear, in my opinion. And it really answered all the questions I was going to ask, all but one. So I appreciate that. I appreciate the clarity and sort of the sequence, and it was very, very logical and linear, so I appreciate that. The second one, the other comment was that you presented us with 3 scenarios, one reducing by 500,000, one by $1 million, and one by 1.5. I think, as Scott kind of demonstrated, I actually don't think that any of us, well, I know that I am not looking at scenario 1 or 2. I think Bolton's number was, if we exceed 5%, we're literally chewing up all of our FY25 new revenue. So we're really looking at 1.5 for the reduction, and I'll be interested to see what happens when those unresolved factors kind of become clearer. So I just want to sort of make that statement on behalf of Bolton that we really need those numbers to be at the 4% range. The only other question that I had was on slide number 31. There was the fourth bullet was extracurricular advisor stipends. You said that we may have to consider going to a fee-based model, or we might want to consider going to a fee-based model. So the questions that I have are, number 1, what's the total value of the stipends in the district? And number 2, how will that impact families?
Okay. Mr. Mulcairn, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I can answer both of those. The first question is the answer that's firm, and it's approximately $278,000 in the budget, the proposed budget for extracurricular advisor stipends. The second question becomes a little bit more nebulous as far as impact on families. If you were to ask me to come up with a plan today, I would want to know enrollment in activities at each level, so meeting with the building principals, understanding what cost may be associated with potentially materials or supplies. And I'm going to be just sort of spitballing, but if there was like a ceramics club in one of our buildings, are those students already paying for the material to participate, even though they might not be paying a fee to participate? So those are the kinds of things that I need to sit with the principals over the next couple weeks and tease out and talk about what would be a reasonable fee structure. Because what we don't want to do is a blanket one-size-fits-all. Because if we do a blanket one-size-fits-all, we may be turning away students who are interested in more or less enrolled activities that may also be their one extra connection or belonging to the school system. So we have to be thoughtful and judicious, and that's why I think just looking at what would a potential fee structure look like at each different level. I can potentially see us having an elementary level fee structure, a middle school level fee structure, and a high school fee structure.
So right now those stipends are built into the operating budget?
Correct. There's no offset to those.
Got it.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for the work around transportation. I think that's an important piece, so thank you.
I will share that with our director at ABC. I know her team worked really, really hard. That particular bid we turned back after the first round, and it rebid a second time because we were not satisfied with the bids that came in. And we were much more satisfied the second time they came around.
Well, we look forward to the 28th, everyone. So thank you for your hard work. None of this is easy.
If you don't mind, Madam Chair, I want to amplify Mr. Powell's point, because his point is exactly a good one. You don't know what to do yet. And that's where we got to get those things, because once we publicly put out the ideas, suggestions, because I think you would probably suspect, do we have like scenarios that we're building? Yep, we do. We have scenarios, and we're starting this, so it's not like we're starting now. We can't publicly put things forward until we know what those unresolved factors are, because it could potentially start controversy in places where it's just not needed. Let's deal with the facts when we have the facts, and that puts us into this time crunch of February 28th to March 13th. That's an unavoidable time crunch. It's just what we have to deal with, but we'll get that information to committee as it comes in.
All right, thanks, Kurt.
So thank you for that.
Thank you, team. All right, guys, moving forward with new business here on the agenda. We have the subcommittee goals check-in. I'm going to push that to the subcommittee reports. You guys can kind of tuck that into your report as we go a little bit lower here, if we have the time to get to the subcommittee reports, that is. But we do have two matters that are relatively straightforward, and things that you knew were coming. The first one is about changing the composition of the school building committee. Joe gave us a little bit of an explanation the last time we were together, and I'm going to let him start with a motion that is a bit long, so buckle up.
Yeah, I gilded the lily on this one a little bit.
Sure did.
But there'll be no, this will be very clear as what we're doing. I was wondering if thank you, Alita. If you go to the second slide, I will make this as brief as possible. And I actually put this together, hopefully to keep this thing brief. And I am looking at the clock, so I know we're up against the 9 o'clock hour. Just to bring everybody back up to speed on what we did 3+ years ago, this committee formed a building committee of 21 members. At the time, we had 14 voting members and 7 advisory members. During the pendency of our committee, we actually altered that count to 15 by adding the superintendent as a voting member. Originally, when Superintendent Clenchey was here, she was not a voting member. We changed this when Superintendent Downing came on board. If you'll notice from the slide, the 15 members of our committee essentially reflect the makeup of this district committee. We have 4 members from Bolton and 5 each from Stowe and Lancaster, which is essentially reflective of our committee of 3, 4, and 4. So what we found at this point, 3+ years into this committee, is that we're finding that we might be a little bit hamstrung by our original member designations for our community members. In particular, we're finding that the gentleman from Bolton who has the elected official designation is not going to be running for re-election this spring, which would, by virtue of the action of this committee, result in him having to step away from the committee. And this is something that we don't want, especially with our community members who are all represented under Tier B. And by the way, these tiers that I put on here, we don't have tiers on our membership. I just put those as the footnote says. That's just for designation purposes. So what the building committee wants to do is essentially make a change to our, what I'm calling the so-called Tier B members, and to strike these member designations. This would not mean that we would not look to fill any upcoming or future vacancies with like-kind individuals, but by striking these designations, it gives us a little bit more flexibility and allows some continuity of membership. And the individual who is up against it with regards to his re-election is a member that we really don't want to lose. He's been a very valuable member of our committee, as I've said in the past, and I think he would only his continued participation in this project would only serve to benefit the district. So I think that the committee was unanimous in its recommendation. I'm fully supportive of this, but I would be remiss if I didn't just take a little caveat here and play devil's advocate for just 1 second and then circle back to show why this is important that we do this. So we have these we had an elected official, we had a town finance committee member, and we also had we also still have a town administrator as part of our membership. And the importance of having those people there was because leading up to our vote, it was important that we had municipal officials involved in this project who could go back to their community, keep the committee apprised, keep their communities apprised of what we're doing, separate and apart from the school committee. We do have a liaison program within the building committee that's comprised of Ms. Vivrito, Ms. Cohen, and myself as the school select board liaisons. But it was valuable leading up to the election in September to have, a select board member, a FinCon member, and also a town administrator. And now that we've achieved success in regards to the funding, there's a couple things to keep in mind. There is always, it's like, what is that line that Jim Carrey, you're telling me there is a chance? So it's, you know the reference. Yeah. So I'm telling you there is a chance that there's a possibility that somewhere in the future, because they can't get ships into the harbor at Long Beach, or some barge gets tied up in the Suez Canal, or there's conflict in the Middle East or there's conflict in Russia and Ukraine, that we might find ourselves in a position where we would have to go back to our communities and ask for additional funding, and it would be of great value to have these individuals on our committee. That being said, I will remind the committee, and this is where I'm circling back to show full support for this, and then I'll get to the motion, that I will remind the committee that our margin of victory in Stowe was modest. Our margin of victory in Lancaster was razor thin. And I'm not so certain that if we had to go back again, that we would have the same success as we had back in September. And to that, I will engage in one moment of schadenfreude, and then I'll read the motion, Madam Chair. I'm sure that many of the people here tonight, probably nobody in this room tonight, except for myself, even knows about this or cares about this, but the latest victim in the MSBA process is the Whittier Regional Vo-Tech High School. They just went to election the third week of January, and I characterize the demise of Dudley Charlton as not being cinematic when they had to withdraw their application. But if there was any election to which the term cinematic would apply, it would be what happened at Whittier. The Whittier Regional School District was, the final count was 73% of those voting against the project. And that included election through 11 different communities in northern Essex County. And what happened was that, that the end result was that, the criticism against the district was really about, lack of transparency in the whole process. And I say, no, it wasn't lack of transparency on any part. It was a simple number of $444 million. And the people of Whittier simply were not going to vote for a $444 million project. It really came down to dollars and cents. So if we had to go back to our communities, I would think that we would be probably facing the same situation as Whittier. But I shed no tear for our friends at Whittier Regional Vo-Tech. Again, this is just for people's edification. These are our 6 advisory members. One thing I did want to point out, and again, I'm probably speaking more than I should on this, but with regards to our voting members, we've had pretty good success. We've had a good core of individuals. We've had very little by way of turnover. We did have 4 members who did have to step away during the pendency of the committee. One of them did pass. One of them was our fellow former school committee member, Mr. Rubenstein, who did pass away. But we've had good success. We want to continue the same core group that is moving forward. And I think I speak for Ms. Cohen, Ms. Viverito, and Superintendent Downing when I say that we have a very good group that's working for this project this time. So with that in mind, I will read the motion. And if anybody has any questions, I can certainly do my best to respond. So I hereby move that upon unanimous recommendation of the members of the Nashoba Regional High School Building Committee in attendance at its January 18th, 2024 meeting duly held and subject to the approval and or waiver of approval of the Massachusetts School Building Authority, the Nashoba Regional School District Committee strikes the Tier B voting member designations as so noted on slide 2 of the Nashoba Regional High School Building Committee composition presentation of even date and otherwise rescinds the member designations of the said Tier B voting members as approved by the Nashoba Regional School District Committee per vote of November 4th, 2020. Further move to affirm and retain the numerical representation of the Nashoba Regional High School Building Committee with respect to 4 voting members from Bolton, 5 voting members from Stowe, and 5 voting members from Lancaster. Further move to affirm and retain the 3 Nashoba Regional School District Committee representative voting member positions on the Nashoba Regional High School Building Committee as shown as the Tier A voting member positions, so noted on slide 2 of the Nashoba Regional High School Building Committee composition presentation of even date, as well as the authority to appoint the chairperson to the Nashoba Regional High School Building Committee. And finally, affirm all their actions and votes of the Nashoba Regional School District Committee with respect to the membership composition of the Nashoba Regional High School Building Committee, including both voting members and advisory members, which are not otherwise inconsistent with the provisions hereof.
I'm going to second that.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And I would like to know if there's any further discussion about this change. I dare you. All right, guys, let's take a vote on Joe's and the school building committee's recommendation to make this change. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? All right, very good. Thanks, Joe, so much for that. Appreciate it. School building committee will be excited that have made the change, and we're happy that Bob can stay with us.
Yeah, he's been chomping at the bit about this. So.
Very good. Happy to serve. All right, guys, one final little detail here on new business, and that is the dissolution of OMAC, which is our revered OPEB Management Advisory Council, and I'll turn to Amy for a motion.
I move to dissolve OMAC, the OPEB Management Advisory Committee. The advisory has fulfilled its charge of an OPEB funding recommendation to the school committee.
I will second that. Any discussion on this?
Actually, I just have one question. So, was the recommendation for just this year, or for like future years, or is this
It's
something?
whatever the school committee makes of it. I mean, it did provide a recommendation for the foreseeable future.
Okay.
But the school committee can obviously do whatever it wants to from year to year, so.
Yeah.
Great. So good work there. Any further discussion? All those, yeah, and thanks to Scott
Yeah.
for forming it and bringing that forward.
It was
awesome.
highly functional.
Yeah. Quick work of it, man. All those in favor
Great work.
of that dissolving? For now, anyway. So that is unanimous. We have no unfinished business, my friends. It is 9:06. We have some subcommittee reports that need to happen. And with a little bit of goal update check-in, we could probably do this in about 7 minutes. Can I get a thumbs up if everybody's okay to do this? All right, so with our eye on the clock, we will move through this. I'm just going to ask you guys to give us a quick update and then let us know if you are making progress towards your goals, if there's any help that you need in reaching those goals. So let's start with budget and warrant.
Budget and warrants goal was to increase accessibility and visibility to the FY25 budget. I think it's something that we've been building on for the past couple of years with the help of Mr. McCarran and, of course, tied to the superintendent's goals. So I think we are definitely making progress towards that. We have not met since January. Our next meeting is on Tuesday.
Great, thank you. Over to communication.
Communication is very close to having the rough draft, or the first draft of the updated manual ready to present to the committee. Well, as soon as we can get that onto the calendar, I think. And so our goal was to have it ready by February. And then beyond that, we will work on getting it into a final edition once we get feedback from the committee around the updates. So we are on track.
Great, thanks for that, Sharon. Let's hear from anything else for the school building committee? Okay, thanks, Joe. Over to back to Sharon for personnel.
So personnel. So our goal was to engage members in the goal development process and have full participation from the committee in the mid-cycle and summative evaluation. To that end, we have done that training just tonight. So, on track.
Awesome, thanks so much for that. Over to policy.
We have the 10 tech policies that we went through that we're ready to bring forward. We have some questions. I think it'll lead to a little bit of discussion, actually. So sometime when we have a chance to get to those. We still have to look at the 2 school lunch. We didn't quite finish that at the last meeting. And we're still making progress on the parent communication piece, which I think we're shooting for like May or something.
Yeah, I think we decided we're gonna visit that in April so that we can bring it forward to the committee for the conclusion.
I'm putting these all in the parking lot, guys. Thanks for that, Amy. Audit advisory, Dina.
We met, I think, 2 weeks ago, and we reviewed an email that we drafted for an RFP, right?
Yeah, it'll be a standalone RFP.
Okay.
I know we originally talked about going out as a email, but I think standalone RFP is okay.
Yeah, so that's what sorry, it's after 9 o'clock. Yeah, so we drafted that. Ross is going to send that out, and then hopefully by the next time we meet, which is the end of the month, we will have any sort of answers or people coming back with some sort of questions. So.
And this is just to shift to a new auditor because the regional agreement demands it?
I don't know. I don't know that it demands it, but I think that the audit advisory would like to interview another set of auditors. We're including.
Yeah, I believe it's a shall solicit.
Yeah.
So I think under that, given that we've had the same auditor for the last several years, who also did our forensic audit, it just became time to say, okay, in looking at the revamp of the regional agreement, where's audit advisory land on this? And so we put together a sort of short list of firms that I found through our regionals. So it would be somebody with regional experience locally. So we'll put those out. And I think we actually have our responses due back right after the budget would be voted on by school committee, so we're not in like an overlap timeline. So we'll hear back from them, and that also opens up at audit advisory with the opportunity to interview firms prior to doing anything moving forward.
We did include Markham on it as well, so because we don't have any issues with Markham, we just think that we need to interview more people for the next round.
Great. Awesome. Thanks, Dana. That's great work. Let's hear from Deirdre.
So Deirdre is meeting next Tuesday. There's no update since the last meeting. I think the opportunity to meet as a group with our equity auditors was well received. So we're looking forward to meet as a group and making progress in that area.
Fantastic, thanks. And Karen's not here for CPAC update, but there was one additional goal that we had. So by the way, Alita posted our updated goals on the main page of the school committee website. Thank you, Amy, for asking for that. There were a couple of goals that were not specific to subcommittees, one of which was creating a formal statement to kind of elevate the pieces of the strategic plan that called for focus on DEIB, and we were able to get that done, and that goal has been met. We also talked about revising and executing a new 3-year contract with the Unit C employees, and as you guys know, that has also been accomplished. And yeah, that's actually it. So everything else was addressed in our goals. So keep pushing toward those. We will obviously do a wrap-up at the end of the year to see how we did with all of the above. Items for next agenda can be emailed to me. The parking lot is kind of full right now with a few things. But please keep in touch. And for now, I'm going to move to adjourn. All those in favor? Thank you, everybody.